The local newspaper, the Arkansas Gazette at that time, indicated that the Brown decision was going to change the face of the South forever. I remember those words. And I thought to myself, good, because I think the face of the South ought to change.
60 years ago, 9 African American teens bravely went to school after many violent protests against them when the Supreme Court outlawed segregation.
On September 23, 1957, the group got into the building with a police escort, but an angry mob of more than 1,000 whites grouped up in front of the school, saying racist slurs such as "Go back to Africa."
In 1954, the Supreme Court declared separate but equal, meaning African Americans are allowed to go to schools that were previously meant for white people. But it wasn't until September 4th, 1957, in Little Rock, Arkansas, that 9 brave African American students, named Little Rock 9, broke barriers by being the first African American students to go to a Caucasian school. The court declared that racial segregation in schools was not allowed. The first couple of students to test the new rules were a group of 9 young high school African American kids. Their names slowly became Little Rock 9. The group's bravery allowed people to gain an early victory in the civil rights movement. Students with potential were told that they would not be able to participate in extracurricular activities if they transferred to Central, such as football, basketball, or choir. Many of their parents were threatened with losing their jobs, and some students decided to stay at their own schools.
The Little Rock Nine, as 9 African American teens became known to be, were the first African American students to enter Little Rock's Central High School. 3 years earlier, following the Supreme Court ruling, the Little Rock School Board pledged to voluntarily desegregate its schools.
None of us of the 9 anticipated that the resistance would be as strong as it was. The night before we were to go to school, the governor called out the Arkansas National Guard, unbeknownst to us. And when we appeared at Central the first day, the National Guard was there to bar our entrance and let white students go into the school.
During the previous school year, Carlotta Walls was a student at a blacks-only junior high school where her homeroom teacher was aware of a district-wide decision to gradually apply the changes that would be required. Her teacher asked the students if they were interested in going to Central High, the city's most highly regarded high school. Carlotta jumped at the opportunity and signed up without asking her parents.
September of 1957, when 9 black teenagers enrolled in a white high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The group of teens would become known as the Little Rock Nine, and their actions sparked one of the most pivotal moments of the civil rights movement.
On the first day of the school term, the National Guard stopped the 9 from entering Central High, where all 1,900 students were white. 3 weeks later, on September 25th, the group faced a violent white crowd, climbed the school steps, and were escorted to class by U.S. Army troops. They became known and respected as Little Rock 9. Attending class in 1957 wasn't the end of the fight for the Little Rock 9 either. The next year, the governor of Arkansas, Governor Fabbis, closed all of the Little Rock's public high schools to avoid integration, leaving 3,700 students without schools. Carlotta was not discouraged. She completed 11th grade by taking correspondence courses. Only a month before receiving her high school diploma, a bomb blew through her house. Carlotta made a point by returning to school the following day. She said, "If I had not gone," Lanier told the NBC News in 2015, "they would have felt like they had won."
The Little Rock Nine went to school and gave an early lead in the civil rights movement. Segregation in school was no more after the Little Rock Nine. Even though they got bullied, they had determination. They had to go through very rough times for the good of all African Americans around the world.
Even though each of the 9 were given a personal military escort for the duration of the year, the troops were not allowed to enter classrooms, bathrooms, or locker rooms. As a result of that, Lanier, one of the 9, like the 8 other black students, endured daily indignities, threats, and violence.
At the end of the school year, Ernest Green became the first African American to ever graduate from Central High School. Martin Luther King had attended his graduation ceremony.
Little Rock, Arkansas, and the first phase of the trouble. The white population are determined to prevent colored students from going to the school their own children attend. Picketing the school, they clash with the police. The law of the land decrees integration of white and colored school children. But racial feeling still runs high in the southern states of America, as shown by these pictures taken by an amateur cameraman. The law of the land is rejected. A near riot developed, so the police made a number of arrests among the ringleaders of the white pickets. Later, the Central High School, Little Rock Storm Center, was sealed off by orders of the governor, who called out the State National Guard. Colored youngsters arrived under safe conduct by the guards. But no sooner had they arrived than they were off again. Arkansas had evidently decided to make its own laws on the subject of integration. Any colored person anywhere near the school came in for violent abuse, even if they now escaped physical violence.
Who were the Little Rock Nine?
Who were the Little Rock Nine? They were the first 9 young African American students who integrated Central High School in the year 1957. And again, these were 9 teenagers who were fighting for equal quality of education, equal opportunities, right? So that's kind of like the most the quickest definition of who they were.
Okay, and what did they exactly do?
What they did again, well, they were the ones that fought for equal opportunities and a better quality of education for everyone in this nation, no matter the color of your skin or the color of your background.
Okay, and where did this take place?
This took place in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And when?
1957.
Okay, and how did they break barriers in racial segregation?
How did they break the barriers of racial segregation? Well, again, are you familiar with Jim Crow laws?
Yes.
Do you know anything about that? Okay. So again, so before the crisis of 1957, as you know, everything was segregated, right? All different areas of society in the U.S. was segregated.
Yes.
Do you know what segregation is?
Yes.
Okay, so segregation was practiced not only in schools, but also in other areas of society, like restaurants, movie theaters, right? Even buses. So in this case, in education, African American students, they were required to attend different schools, okay? But now those schools were not offering the same quality of education as the white schools. So again, the Little Rock Nine and thousands of other young people their age, again, they realized that, this was not fair and that everyone should receive the same equal opportunities, right? So again, in 1957, they became the first ones who tried to integrate Central High School, a school that was only for white students prior to that. And they were able to break the racial barriers by integrating Central High School and demanding for a better quality of education. And also one thing I want to tell you, of course, when they tried to enter Central High School for the first time, it doesn't mean that they were able to go inside the school with no opposition. The governor of Arkansas at that time, Orville Fauvus, he brought the Arkansas National Guard in order to keep them out, okay? And then several weeks after, the president of the United States at that time, Eisenhower, he has to bring in the federal troops, the 101st Airborne, in order to protect the African American students and to make sure they will enter the high school. So that was the moment when they were finally able to go inside the school. Okay? So did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. So what's the next question?
Little Rock Nine was one of the major events that happened during the Civil Rights Movement. They broke barriers by being the first African American children to go to an all-white school. In 1954, the Supreme Court declared separate but equal, meaning African Americans are allowed to go to schools that were previously meant for white people. But it wasn't until September 4th, 1957, in Little Rock, Arkansas, that 9 brave African American students, named Little Rock Nine, broke barriers by being the first African American students to go to a Caucasian school.